Welcome to another episode of Turning Point Tactics, and on this particular episode I'm talking through the tier list that I have in my mind for this edition, and go through all the relevant teams, where I think they sit comparatively to each other and the meta as it currently stands, and try and give a bit of justification as to why I've placed them where they are. I'll do the teams alphabetically because it's probably the easiest way to do it, and there's a lot of teams we have to go through now. So if you're not interested in the overall stuff, you can just skip to your individual team by looking said alphabetically. The image that's on the screen now is going to show you my overall placement of all the teams. So if you're just literally here to see where I place something without any background context, you can look at that and do that. But what I will try and do during this video is just kind of justify my logic behind each of the individual choices, so then you can see why I've placed it in a certain place, and it might be that you learn something about your team or my opinions about your team as we go through. That being said, there's a whole bunch of teams out there, and it's always impossible for me to have knowledge of that specific team and all of the matchups that exist, right? It's just too complicated. So if you think I've missed something and there's a reason why potentially it's not the way it is, and actually I should be looking at it a different way, then please do in the comments let me know what I've got wrong, or where potentially I've got it right, or where it's going to be. Just before we do get into the tier list itself, I'm just going to explain briefly what a tier list is, why I do it the way I do it, and my thought process. So a tier list is purely my subjective opinion, right? So with that, what I would say is that individual mileage will vary, like your local meta, your terrain that you play on, the missions that come up, the players that you have within your meta are going to dictate and change all of these things, right? So perfect example, Italy had a very, very good Kroot player who routinely dominates the scene with Kroot. That was not seen last edition anywhere else, but that individual got really, really good with that team. I think he probably could have done better with a different team. But that being said, it meant that in Italy they thought it was ridiculous how low Kroot were being rated, but no one else could replicate that success. Same exists in the US with like Gellerpox, for example, and so these are all things that are worth considering going through. But what's worthy to note is what I have done is actually look at some of the objective stats as well. So I've gone to the data of win percentage and placing, and try to justify my scores based on that as well. So by that, I have weighted more heavily on placement data than I have on win percentage, because as far as I'm concerned, if you're winning more events with a smaller group of people that are doing it, i.e. your percentage of people achieving a win is higher, that is an indicator that you're a more successful team and more likely to win. Because on this tier list, like my whole way of doing this is under the assumption that we're all top level players playing at the highest possible level. It's not like a beginner game, it's like tournament games, right? And as a result, you're trying to win potentially 6 games in a row, and therefore what team is most likely to give you those 6 wins in a row, and then potentially fulfill all the other win conditions if you're not. So if you're at a 64 player event, you only get 4 rounds, you might be undefeated, but there might also be 2 or 3 other undefeated players. Okay, well, how well have you done on VP? How well have you done with your likelihood of winning all those games in the first place? What are the other tiebreakers? That sort of thing. So that's kind of where I'm going with this. So it's your likelihood of getting a first, second or third at a tournament, noting that there's a lot of teams at the moment where you'll probably do very, very well, and get like a 3-1, but you might not necessarily get that gold, silver or bronze, depending on what you want to do. A few other bits I'm just going to caveat at the beginning. I think it's worthwhile showing where my head is with this sort of stuff. So I've mentioned that each individual meta is going to heavily inform your opinion of where we are. And it's also worth noting that, in my opinion, that we're in quite a counter meta at the moment. I.e., I think I sort of said a few weeks ago, it's a rock paper scissors meta. It's a bit more complicated than that. Obviously, there's so many teams, but broadly, it's that kind of thought process as you go into some matchups. So an example might be, I won't spoil it too much, but I say like Pathfinders, I think, are a really strong team. but I think teams like Goremongers can counter them very, very well. And so therefore, Pathfinders versus, say, an elite team like Plague Marines can probably do a whole bunch of damage and tear them to pieces. But the Goremongers are going to probably beat the Pathfinders, and then the Plague Marines are probably going to beat the Goremongers, right? So like, it's that kind of mentality of each individual team can beat each other, but they're the counter to each other at the same time. So that exists on a whole different level across all of these sorts of things, and that's what I'm talking about. There is some like archetypes that I think exist in the game. So the ones that probably everyone is familiar with the most is going to be your elite teams, right? So that's your Marine teams, usually 6 bodies, 3 APL, 3 up saves, 12 to 14 wounds, that sort of thing, right? And they are by far the most popular teams in the meta right now. So if you are a team that is weak into elite teams, this meta is going to be difficult for you, because if you don't have the tools to deal with them, then you're probably going to be in a bad place. Then you have like the pseudo elites. These are the sort of the Eldari teams, the Goremongers, the Hierotek. Weirdly, Warp Coven can do both elites and pseudo elites. It's sort of a weird mix. They're usually like fast, they're 3 APL probably, or pseudo 3 APL, and they're really good at smashing elites. So they do a lot of burst damage. They can get through those stat checks very, very easily, and they potentially outrange and outdamage your opponents. So you have those sort of pseudo elite teams. Then you have like the horde teams, which is just the sort of like they're different play styles. It could be a melee horde like Chaos Cult. It could be a shooting horde like Pathfinders. But lots of activations, lots of models on the board, and they probably have like some ways of dealing with elite models, but it's usually only a few models on the team that can do so. There are some exceptions. I said like Chaos Cults can create more torments, but you generally only have a few models that are good at dealing with them, so you can potentially get targeted and removed. But if you're like against a pseudo elite team, you might have more success because you can potentially kill those models way easier, depending on your damage threshold. Then you have mid-range teams. I think these, in my opinion, are struggling at the moment. You don't see too many of them. These are sort of like your Hearthkyn, your Hernkyn, your Novitiates, your I guess breaches are kind of there. Kasrkin, Scouts, like Hunter Clade. Like those are your sort of mid-range teams, right? In my opinion, they're kind of like a jack of all trades. That they sit right back bang in the middle. They're either usually a little bit durable but slow, or a little bit fast and fragile. And I think they're really struggling in the meta at the moment. They don't seem to do well into those 3 previously mentioned archetypes of those elites, pseudo elites, and those hordes. They just sort of seem to do okay into all 4, but potentially have like a bad matchup into one of those 3. And because those are sort of the most popular ones that we see, the elites, pseudo elites, and those hordes, if you're like okay into 2 of them but bad into 1 of them, then you can get hurt quite a lot. So that's just for context of where we are in the meta, in my opinion. And now we're going to get into the actual tier list itself. So it's going to be quite a long intro probably, and it's going to be quite a long episode because there's so many teams to go through. So with all that said, let's get straight into it. Hello and welcome to Turning Point Tactics, the competitive Kill Team 40k YouTube channel focused on giving you the strategies and tactics to seize initiative every turning point. I'm your host Ryan, and I'm here to help give you the tips and tricks to elevate every part of your Kill Team experience. So no matter if you're a casual or a competitive player, there should be something here for you. If you're interested in supporting the channel, there's a few ways you can go about doing so. You can join the Patreon, where you get access to members only Discord, Patreon priority questions, early access to content, exclusive content, and tournament awards. Or if you find yourself buying Kill Team goodies or hobby supplies, you can use one of our affiliate links in the description below, or discount codes with Crossfire Games and GG Prints. We're always keen to hear your thoughts and feedback, so don't leave that comment box empty. Let us know what you think. Once again, thanks for your support, and with all that said, let's get into it. Okay then, so first up, I'm talking about Angels of Death as the first team on the roster. Now, interestingly, most people place this team quite high. They're usually in the A tier, or sort of like high A, maybe low S and that sort of thing. I actually think that they're probably towards the lower end of B. So you can see that I sort of put them in towards the bottom of B tier there, and you're probably thinking like, why is that? Like, they have a relatively good win percentage, but they don't get gold or medals very often. Why is that, right? So they actually have a pretty significantly large player base, and therefore you would expect them to pick up quite a few tournament wins, right? Because if you have a lot of players playing them, you expect to be able to tournament wins. My issue with them, I think, is they really struggle to do anything particularly well. So they're not particularly fast, right? So when you compare them to, say, like Celestial Legionaries or Phobos Marines or Hierotek or something like that, they're not that quick, actually. So they kind of can be slow. They're low activation count, so they can get played around with their activations very, very easily by other teams. They don't do a huge amount of damage. They're a volume damage-based team, but like one-on-one against like a core legionary, your guys are probably going to lose. And so they're not great at killing other elites, which are really popular in the meta. Like when you look at most of the other elite teams, they can usually kill them better than they can be killed. Additionally, when it comes to durability of the team, again, like there are more durable elite teams that are out there, such as like Plague Marines, essentially are just more durable versions of yourself, and do a similar level of damage output like to you. And they just don't have any real massive tricks, right? So as a team goes, they're very easy to learn how to play against and how to counter. And because they're so popular, most people have probably learned your tricks, and most people have probably predicted how to play against you. So for me, I think actually they're probably one of the worst elite teams. That being said, they're still solid. They've got a good stat line. I think they're a team that if you don't learn how to beat, you're not going to win a tournament. And so therefore they kind of, I think, cap a lot of people out of the meta at the moment. So that's my opinion. I think that's where they sort of sit. I haven't seen anyone particularly doing astronomically well with them. And when I played with them, I was like, you know what, like they're a good team, but they just don't have the oomph to get stuff across the line. Is where I kind of stand with it. So for me, Angels of Death, they're a bit B tier team towards the lower end. Next up, we have Blades of Khaine. So Blades of Khaine aren't that popular at the moment, and I think that's because there are just like some better options of them, and they're also extremely complicated to play. That being said, I think as Void Dancers fade out of the meta, if they do, there's a whole discussion about that, but it's a separate video. I think they'll rise in popularity because essentially they're a very fast 3 APL team, but oddly, like unlike most of the pseudo elites, they're not actually that good into elites themselves. They're a lot better into the other sort of archetypes I talked about. So if you're like an 8 wound model team, this team can tear you up pretty easily. So I think they play really well. I think their archetypes are really good for the game as well to be able to score highly. So if you take 3 Howling Banshees, you're able to almost always take Recon, plant beacons, that kind of thing, score quite effectively. Or if you know that you're in a good position to take Seek and Destroy, your all 3 APL team, you can get overrun and that kind of stuff as well, right? So the fact that they can flex that archetype quite well, to be able to select the best terrain, map, mission, whatever they need to do, means that they can play really well to the win condition, and therefore I think they're really likely to score pretty highly on VP, and therefore I put them pretty high up there in my opinion. I just think sadly currently I think Void Dancers are a better option than them, and that's probably the only thing that's sort of keeping them from being played way more than anything else. But they have a lot of APL. They're very, very effective at killing people. They've got some good reliability, some interesting durability buffs. They've got loads of tricks with their sort of their faction abilities. So I think they're a very hard team to play. Like hats off to people that do and master them. But I do think they have the capability to win tournaments. But you have to like sink in and dedicate yourself to doing so. So yeah, I think for me they are towards the sort of top of A tier, and there's only a few teams that are above them in the meta, in my opinion. Okay, next up we're talking about Blooded. Blooded for me are just like so they're a mixed horde, right? So they're able to do a combination of sort of shooting and melee. They've got some pretty decent like abilities. They put out damage well, but they just do everything kind of okay. They're a meh team, I think. I think they are good into, you know, a lot of the, how to describe it, like a lot of the other Hordy teams that they can trade really well with. So their damage potential model for model is good into those sort of profiles, and they're really good at sort of beating up mid-range teams. So if you've got a team that doesn't like taking too much damage, like say like Kasrkin's a good example, you can put the hurt on Kasrkin because each one of your models can probably trade with a Kasrkin, and like that's a bad game for them, particularly as you have activation advantage, so you can be waiting out and then hitting them quite hard afterwards. I think the issue for me with Blooded is their ability to actually score tac ops. So like the issue with having infiltration and seek and destroy, in my opinion, is they're both like they're just both bad for them, because they don't have the APL to get seek and destroy, and infiltrate means that you're probably sacrificing something else to achieve it. So in my opinion, I think they're the mixed horde team with just the worst archetypes, and therefore they're okay. They're in the middle of B. They can do some decent stuff, but they're not going to say anything on like crazy, like good, and that's kind of where that they sit, in my opinion. So yeah, they're a Hordy team right in the middle of B. There you go. That's Blooded. Alrighty, next we're into Brood Brothers. Subtly different team, Brood Brothers, because I think they are one of the best Horde teams out there. They have quite a lot of flexibility. I think one of the things that, again, literally the same thing that I just talked about with Blooded, is their archetypes can hold them back a bit, but they do have security. So they have security and infiltrate, right? And so therefore they are able to score security somewhat reliably against teams that they outnumber. If you're against like elite, say, particularly if they're a slow elite team, you can probably score that quite well. If you're against a fast elite team, then you can be in a bit of a difficult situation where you're kind of now focusing on, like, hopefully the map has seized ground options, or it's got a good center line and central control option potentially, or you're now looking into like trying to do like an infiltrate kind of thing. And what they don't want to see across the board from them is a team such as someone like I don't know, like Void Dance or something like that, which are able to move so quickly, with the exception of the fact that they have like all of their damage profiles are just fantastic at killing 8 wound models. So they're a really odd team, right? Because on paper, like I'm worried that they're gonna just essentially not score tac ops particularly well against those kind of teams. But like actually, if you're an 8 wound team, they'd probably slap you about really well. The Magus is just so strong. The Primus, I think, has a place if you're a particularly aggressive player and you need that initiative dependency. But if not, I think the Magus usually wins out. I do think, though, that there is like a lot of reliability issues in them when it comes to countering elites. So, and particularly against fast elites, because if you have an elite player that's quick and can kill you quite fast, I think you really struggle to have the damage output that you need to take down a lot of their stats. And then as soon as you've like passed turning point 2 and they now know what tac ops you've got, like they're able to probably hard deny that unless you're running something like implant or surveillance, but then you're just putting models out there that can potentially be killed. So like, I don't know, I think they're like anti-elite choices are really difficult for them. So that being said, you know, like they're still like an exceptionally good team. I think that just what will probably hurt them is they'll win a lot of their games. They might have a very close game against an elite player, and their tac ops will take a hit as a result. And that's probably where my concern would be for Brood Brothers. But if your dice are effective and efficient, then I think you're probably going to be okay throughout the day. So Brood Brothers, for me, they're sort of like middle of A tier. I think they're a decent pick. I think you're most likely running security a lot of the time, and then you're taking some specific matchups and maps, you'll be switching out into your infiltrate options, but you probably don't want to be doing that. And then that's probably how they're going to play. But my point being is, overall, that they're like against the elf teams, I think they can absolutely slap them down. They've got loads of 4 damage across the board. So 8 wound models hurts. and that also affects the mid-range guys because most of them are 8 wounds as well. But I think there's just some certain elite matchups that they don't enjoy, and that's where it kind of like hurts them a little bit. So Brew Brothers are A tier in my opinion. All right, next up we have another Horde team, and this one is a melee Horde, and this is Chaos Cult. So Chaos Cult for me are S tier. So I kind of want to explain why, because I guess like what everyone's going to say is like, well, they're just infiltration and seek and destroy, and you just said that, you know, infiltration is bad and seek and destroy for hordes is bad, and that is true, right? So those things haven't changed, but what is different is just how many models Chaos Cult have. So Chaos Cult have loads of models, loads of threats, and they're pretty happy to let people essentially live when they can put so much pressure out on the board, right? So again, like Chaos Cults really don't like any team that's exceptionally good at melee, so that they can just like obliterate them close up. But if they can just be moving up and implanting elites, and you can't deal with them, that's pretty good for them. They can tank the damage, or like if they can do the surveillance and just have it at the end of the turning points where they just go, yep, get a surveillance point, get a surveillance point, get a surveillance point. They can quite quickly wrap those up with the activation advantages that they have. So long as they maintain that tempo, and so long as they have that sort of wall of torments that are in your face, that you're sort of having to deal with more often than not, then I think you're always kind of on the back foot, because if you don't deal with the torments, then they're going to be killing your guys too quickly, and they probably just win on crit up and kill up, most likely, and they'll take the hit on the tack up. But if you do focus on the torments, then they're going to be using their guys effectively to get tack up points on the side, whilst again just having that pressure on the main objectives. So for me, I think Chaos Cults are in a really strong place. I think they do a better melee job than a lot of the melee teams. And it's things like their injury aura, or not injury aura, -1 to hit aura, that just make them so hard for a lot of teams to deal with. If you're hit on 4's base, like they can just tie you up in combat, and they can kill you if they want to, if they need to for the kill up, or they'll just sort of leave you there and just body block you with enough bodies that you can't do much about it. And with all the sort of levels of damage reduction, healing potentially they can have as well, APL manipulation, like chip damage here, there and everywhere, they can be a real pain to deal with. So for me, I think they're an S tier team. I think they're right at the top, one of the best teams in the game at the moment. Okay, next up we're into Corsair Voidscarred. This was a team that was performing really well before the last balanced data slate, and they took I think a pretty significant nerf. So I think they've dropped from sort of like high A, low S tier, to my opinion being into B tier. And the reason for that is like they, again, so this is a pseudo elite team, right? So that they're not quite 3 APL, they're 9 models, but they can score well because they have the sort of the free dashes. So that they can do sort of various mission actions well, but I'm just a bit worried at sort of how fragile they can be, and a lot of their, I guess, counter horde abilities now have been toned down. So the ability to sort of jump out and quickly kill someone that wasn't expecting it with the Shadow Runner or Shade Runner, that has been toned down, like ITD. Okay, well, not the end of the world, but it was kind of like free chip damage that you were getting that you now can't get. But I think also the Hunter's ability to essentially fight first was really strong ability against a lot of these sort of mixed teams, because you could have someone that's just there ready to go, and now they can't, and so they take way more damage. And then on top of that, they had the impact of the Just a Scratch nerf, which essentially meant that they traded a lot worse into elite teams, horde teams, and mid-range teams, etc., etc. So now, if you're a team that can have access to lethal 5, you've got rending potentially, like a lot of these elite teams do, you can just go in and just get rid of them, and they can't really do anything about it. And so therefore, it's like, they're still, I think, a pretty good team. I think they're in a decent place. I think they'll score well, and they'll be middle of the pack most of the time. And whenever you're against them on the table, you have to treat them with respect. They're a decent team, but I just don't think they're quite as good as some of the other teams that are out there right now. An example is like Goremongers are faster than them. They have a bit more flexibility than them. The shooters on your team just can't deal with them. Your melee guys, like, you need to be on the offensive, because if you're ever on the defensive, you probably died and is going to heal during it, etc., etc. Right? So, like, in my opinion, like, I think towards the lower end of B is a fair place to be, and I think that's where they belong. Okay, next up is Deathcore of Krieg. So, for my opinion on this is, I think they are a shooting horde that can do quite well now at doing what horde stuff does. So, if you're a team and you're not set up for fighting a horde, so which has like melter guns, plasma guns, all that sort of stuff, and a perfect example of this is like Angels of Death, right? If you're not ready for that and you're not understanding how that works, where turn one you expose yourself too much potentially, these guys are going to slap you with some high damage weaponry, and then take out key operatives, and they're going to win that attrition war, and they're going to force you to come towards them and play that game with security, and using their activation advantage probably score pretty well on it throughout. But that being said, I think again there's a whole bunch of teams that just shut this team down right now. Teams like Goremongers, where that strategy just does not work, right? So you cannot reliably use a single activation to kill a Goremonger, right? So Melt Gun ain't going to do it, Plasma ain't going to do it, you're going to do 8 damage and that is it. If you then end up being too close to someone, it was your last activation, they're going to charge you, they're going to heal during their next thing, they're going to fight, all that sort of stuff, they're going to kill other people, and they have huge threat range to be able to counter it. And like same to can be said for like Chaos Cult and that sort of stuff as well. You know, when you're in that like horde versus horde meta, you really need your kills to be effective, and you don't necessarily know where the threats are in that particular game until they have appeared, and it's a bit late. So I think they're a solid team. I think they're going to score pretty well, but for me they kind of just sit right in the middle of B tier. Having 14 operatives is always strong, but they're not doing anything particularly crazy. I think they're just kind of doing average stuff, which for average stuff gets you average placement in B tier. So that is Deathcore Krieg. Next up is the Elucidian Starstriders. So this is one of the team that I personally really enjoy playing. I've had a lot of fun with them in the past. I think they are an exceptionally fun team to play. I think they have loads of flexibility and roles that you can do with them. The issue I think that they have right now is they are not quite killy enough to counter elites easily, and they have some real menaces out there in the meta that are just going to shut them down. And at the moment, those menaces are particularly popular. So let's talk through those, all right? So I think this team can do really well into certain elite teams, such as your Angels of Death, such as your Legionary and that sort of stuff. What I don't think they do well into is teams like Warp Coven that can just mess with your manipulation of your rolls to mean that your key strikes with your piercing 2 weapons just don't pop off the way you want it to, and therefore aren't effective. And your melee on that team is essentially crit damage melee, so they can also nerf a key particular threat that you have set up to ensure that doesn't work either. And therefore, once that's happened on a turning point and you've lost a key melee operative and your APT weapon has failed, like you're in the hurt locker straight away. Combine that with the fact that you have like Goremongers that are out there now, which are doing exactly the same thing, but they're guaranteeing it, and they threat range you so much better than you do for them. And with their sort of rending chainswords or rake on impact, they can get around your damage mitigation and kill you pretty effectively in 2 hits. Like, oof, that is a rough matchup. You're going to struggle to do anything about that at all. And then also into the horde meta, things like Chaos Cults, I think, shut you down again. So, you know, they can tank the damage, they out-activate you, and essentially they're going to wait and see who has initiative. And if you get initiative, they're going to make sure there's torments in places that are safe. And if they get initiative, they're going to make sure there's a torment in a place which is threatening for you, right? So you're constantly having to play this game, and I just don't think they have quite the tools to be able to deal with it, which is a shame. So for me, I think they're probably going to lose more games than they're going to win, or you're going to have really like a real struggle into a lot of these games. and therefore for me, I think they sit in C tier. That being said, I think they're one of the better teams in that tier. I think they can still do well into quite a lot of the meta, but just the key problem childs that they're going to face are popular at the moment, and I don't think they have an answer to them. So for me, that's where I think they sit in towards top of C. Next up, we have Exaction Squad. So again, this is another team that I've played, and I've really enjoyed playing them. I think they're good fun, but they don't do great against elites. They have like a very weird matchup where essentially all of Turning Point 1, they're going to stack buffs on a certain model on your team, and then during Turning Point 2, they're going to be very good at killing that individual model, right? So that's how it works, and then they're going to restack buffs onto another model and maybe try and kill that. So that is how they play, which means that they don't do well, in my opinion, against other models outside of the ones that they have stacked their buffs against. So by that I mean having like punishing, severe, and like a piercing one shot into them, followed by like a Weber or something like that, to have lethal 5 and dev wounds off the sniper and that kind of thing. So they're like stacking damage on individual models, but they're never having like enough burst damage just to say, yep, that model is done in a single activation. It's almost always taking a couple of models to get through. But what they do have, which is really useful, is I think right now there's a bunch of teams that are quite popular, like Goremongers, Chaos Cults, Sanctifiers to a degree, where and Fellgor were popular for a while, but they're now, I think, falling back in popularity, where essentially like their shields and being able to fight first and control the pace of the game can be really, really strong. That's why I think that they're in B. I think they are towards the latter end of B, or in the middle of B probably, because, and again, this is kind of one of the issues that I think they have, is they're all 8 wound teams, 8 wound models, and if you have teams that can do that sort of level of damage quite reliably, be that Brew Brothers or be that Pathfinders, you can get shot off the board quite easily, and their sort of turning off rerolls isn't as good as it used to be for that. So yeah, they're an interesting team in that regard, in that respect. But I think they've got some good matchups, but like they also have some really bad matchups as well, and therefore they kind of again just sit right in the middle of B tier. So yeah, so for me, Exaction Squad, they're in B tier. Okay, next we have Farstalker Kinband. This team plays very differently to how a lot of other teams play, because they're essentially going to win by like crit op and tack op and using their activation advantage really effectively. They can be surprisingly killy if you play into them and you give them as opportunities, and they'll do quite a lot of damage on the way out quite often. But they like the fact that they're essentially a recon-based team, and that they're going to use their 12 bodies really effectively with their ability to poach as well, and just either be on crit ops or on beacons the entire game. And I don't really see a way that's like easy to counter that without exposing yourself, which then means that they can have the damage to take you down if you're a lead team or something in that way. That being said, I think they're very reliably scoring recon. I think they're a good team right now. But I still think there's teams out there that do have the potential to kill them. And I think in some of the Horde mirror matches, they can potentially suffer in that respect, because they, broadly, they just do the mission, the crit op and the tack up really well. But I don't know what it is about them. Like there's just something missing where, like if your opponent gets a double kills or has the ways to play around them, like suddenly you can get caught out, and it's hard to describe for me. But I think they're probably one of the better hordes. I think there's maybe 2 hordes that I think are better than them. So I guess in that respect they're pretty decent. But yeah, so top of B tier for me is where I think they sit. I think they're going to score reliably all their recon points. I think they're going to do pretty well on the tack op, and then it's going to come down to how well you can do on the crit op, and how your opponent's playing into them. So for me, I think they're sort of top of B. and that's where I think they currently sit. Okay, next up, we have Fellgor Ravagers. So this is a team that I think has had a bit of a fall from grace, because they were S tier, and they are still really good. I think, I don't know, like, so currently I have them in sort of the middle of B. And the reason I have them in the middle of B is because there's so many people out there right now that are just hunting or ready to hunt Fellgor. Like, everyone has been getting so much practice in considering how to like beat Fellgor and do that, right? And right now they have like a team that I think is doing their role better than they can do it, which is Goremongers. With the damage reduction and all that sort of stuff, Goremongers can probably parry you out during your activation, and you won't kill them. They can then heal up and probably kill you if you're unlucky. You get very, very dice dependent against them in that respect, and you're only 4 attacks. You have teams like Nemesis Claw and Legionary that I just think outperform them on melee, so that every time they charge someone, it becomes just a bit horrendous for them to be able to actually get the damage through and not risk just dying. Plague Marines just makes them so swingy, because the contagion aura and the ability to try and do damage, plus the damage mitigation that the Plague Marines have, just means that I think your models bounce off them quite a lot. So you're locked into like this pseudo mortal wound game plan where you're just like in mortal wounds, and hoping that you can chip people to a sufficient amount that you can then get the kills. That being said, like, they're also a team that are exceptionally good at killing elves, like 8 wound models and less. Like they can do really, really well on. I think they're a natural counter to like Pathfinders right now. And so like there's definitely a place for them in the meta, and I would not be surprised to see them do well. And if they have the right path to victory, I can see them getting up there. But I just think the likelihood is that you're gonna find yourself playing against a whole bunch of teams that are just really effective at killing you. And they have issues right now, like Sanctifier is a good example. So if a Sanctifier Flamer does 9 damage to them and sets them on fire, well, they activate and they die. They get 1 activation during their frenzy, and that is it. They're gone, which is like such a hard counter to the way that team plays. You combine that, as I said, with the elite matchups and all that sort of stuff, and suddenly there's this horrible little place where they're like, I don't know what to do best. So for me, I think they're in the middle of B. I might be being a bit harsh. Maybe they deserve to be the sort of the bottom of A. But I think that there's just so many teams out there right now that are just so good at particularly beating Fellgor, that they kind of sit in the middle of B. That I might be wrong, but that's kind of where I stand. And I should probably just comment on the balance data update as well. The change in reliability for them was pretty significant. So being able to, the strategic ploy of being able to retain and misses the hit to give them the 3 hits that they need to kill 8 wound models, versus them potentially only getting like a crit and a hit now, is a huge difference, right? So I think their reliability has dropped, and I think that's going to hurt them a lot going forward. So for me, Fellgor Ravagers, they're in sort of the middle of B tier at the moment. Okay, next up is Gellerpox Infected. So again, this is a melee team that, as far as I'm aware, they barely get any play in the UK, right? So like, I personally haven't played against them yet. So I take all this with caveats, but from what I've heard and from what I've sort of seen online and how I read into the team, they're a melee team that's a bit too slow. And the issue with being a melee team that's too slow is if you don't push far enough up the board early enough, then you potentially just aren't going to get involved in the fight that you need to. But for them to then be there, then they're potentially being exposed to a lot of incoming damage that they can't necessarily mitigate too well against. Combine that with the fact that I think people are getting way better with using various means of asymmetric threat ranging. So potentially they're using vantages to be able to stage. They're using barricades. They're using razor wire. They're using, all sorts of manners and tricks and tools to keep your models back and not being able to get into combat. And I think that for them is so damaging, because unless you have those hulks being impactful and actually engaging in the fight, they're in a really bad place. So like for a melee team that's like struggling to have the movement potential it needs, for me, I think they're still in D tier. I know they've got some buffs, and I'm happy to say that I might be wrong, and they could be way better. But just from my sort of initial reading, I think they're going to get stunned a lot. They're going to get held up by barricades and items. I'm going to take a whole bunch of damage before they get to the fight, and then they're probably going to stuck when they get there. So that for me is how I feel about it. And it's just worth saying as well, like combine that with being security and seek and destroy, you're sort of locked in security. And I know it's like, oh well, my opponent's going to come to me, and it's like, well, yes, but like also you can't be everywhere all the time, right? So as you're activating, if you're against another horde, then there's a chance that they can just be like, yeah, I'm just going to put this person wholly within your half. Cool, that's denied you 1 point attack op. I'll repeat this over and over and over, and it's going to be difficult for them, and it's going to be harder for them to deny attack ops on the other way. So for me, it's going to be a D tier team for Gellerpox Infected. Okay, next up we have Goremongers, which are the new kids on the block that are, I think, doing quite well. I think I might be overrating them here. So I'm 50-50 on this. I think that if you have the right matchups, Goremongers are going to be so good. Like, if you avoid some of their big baddies that are out there, I think you can do really well. Against some elite teams, they kind of suck. They become way too swingy. You need to use your range advantage really carefully to make sure that you do enough damage on entry and you chip people correctly, and you start the trading more effectively. But if you can get out meleeed and people can just beat you in melee, then Goremongers, I think, hurt a lot. That being said, I think there's teams out there that as soon as they see Goremongers across the table, teams like Vetguard, teams like teams like Vetguard, teams like Pathfinders, that when you see them across the table, you think to yourself, oh my, like, this is going to be gross, because that team is lightning fast. It's really durable to shooting, impressively durable to melee, and can probably kill you quite easily, particularly if they have access to rerolls. My concern with them is that they're a 4 attack team, so that the ability for them to reliably kill stuff comes up quite a lot. Like you often see them yeeting themselves into melee and not getting the kills, and I think that comes down to them being quite susceptible to dice, particularly again, and that's very much true against teams that are good at melee. So if you're a good melee team, Goremonger matchup becomes so dice dependent, and I think that's why they hurt in those particular matchups. That being said, they're also very quick. They can play recon. They can just plant beacons. They can play around it. They don't have to commit to an early fight if they don't want to. So they can sort of stage off and wait, and then use their activation advantage to make sure they score, and then use a sort of like a combo at the end to get effective kills where they need to. Right. So I think if you play that game with them and that mentality, then I think they're S tier. Particularly, as I said, because of the way they can shut out just a lot of teams in the meta, and they're so good at doing that right now. And I guess one of the key parts that I want to just raise on this is, for me, it's their speed more than anything else. I think you have to use them in that way. Like, the difficulty of playing against Goremongers is being able to be far enough back to be safe, but also far enough forward to be able to play the missions that you need to play. And for most teams, for you to be able to be effectively playing the crit op and your own mission, your own tac op, you have to exist within a Goremonger's threat range. And they don't necessarily have to kill you. Like, if they're playing at security, they can just move up at the end, or they can do a crazy charge and just pass, deny you points, sit in the right locations, etc. And if you're not engaging with them, they can potentially be scoring attack ops such as plant beacons if they wanted to on turning point 1 and 2 quite easily, and then they're drawing you out, right? So you have to then come out to them. But if they win initiative, then the model that's forward can just yeet themselves in and potentially pick up a double kill here and there, or do a lot of damage to a single model as needed. So for me, I think they're S tier because of the way that they interact with those sort of mechanics. But I think they're probably towards the lower end of S tier, and like arguably I think they might be at the bottom of S tier, because for me, like I think that's probably where they're fairest, because like if you like, for instance, whenever I play elites against them, I'm just in my mind I'm like, I'm going to move up and shoot you twice, and so long as I can reliably do 6 damage in shooting, I will kill you. And that's the counterplay, because when you get into melee with them, unless you're a very good melee team, like doing 10 damage in melee is really hard to do in 2 hits. So most of the time ends up taking like 3 hits, and they've chunked you for 8 on the way back or something like that. And that's kind of how they want to play. So therefore, like that's what they do really well. They also absolutely hate Angels of Death, but I think if you avoid Angels of Death for the first few rounds, you're likely to avoid them on the way up. You're likely to avoid them in the latter stages, in my opinion, and therefore, like in the rounds where it's starting to matter more, that's where you can play against them. And realistically, against Angels of Death, they should be using their activation advantage and then yeeting 2 models at the end, doing some rake damage or chip damage first with a crack grenade, finishing off with the rake, etc., etc. Rake and fire is the way I should say. But for me, S tier for Goremongers. I don't think people are too surprised at that. It's to do with their durability of shooting, their ability to score recon reliably and quite easily, and also, in my opinion, it's their movement potential. They're just so fast. So that's Goremongers, S tier. All right, next up we have Hand of the Archon. This is a team which I don't really know too well, as in where to place them, because I think they do a very similar thing to Corsairs. I don't know if they're better or worse than Corsairs. I think it's like a 50-50 for me. I think they can do some things really well, but I'm not quite sure which side of it is they are. That being said, like I also think they have some predators at the moment that are sort of doing them dirty, and that's probably like your Pathfinders, that's your Brood Brothers. They're the sort of teams I think are going to hold this team back, and also for most of the parts as well, Goremongers as well. Because unless you can shoot them, then charge and fight, I think you're going to struggle to potentially get the damage output that you need. And the problem is that most of the time, I think you're going to have to move and shoot them, and then they're going to be able to then react and kill the model you've exposed, for that example. And I think, for instance, Void Dancers do a lot of what they do, but potentially better, being natively 3 APL across the board. I know they lose a model, but they gain, like, essentially, or everyone gets an extra APL, they ignore piercing, etc., etc. So I think for me they're towards the lower end of B tier. I still think they're very killy. They can pick up double kills really well. They're great against like horde teams where they can potentially just shoot, kill someone, boost an APL, charge someone else, fight, or charge, fight, then shoot someone else, etc., etc. Like if they can start that train going, it's very hard for them to stop, and they are surprisingly killy, right? So I think it's one of those teams where you have to respect the killing potential, particularly if you're sort of 8 wounds or less. Then again, that's a lot of what they sort of thrive on. And therefore, like for me, they're a decent team. They're a solid pick, but they are probably just below Corsairs towards the lower end of B tier. But that being said, I think they're going to score attack ops well. I think they can score the kill op pretty well. They've got good odds on crit op as well. So I don't think they're a bad team by any means. But I think that they just have some natural predators out there that are going to make it difficult for them to have a sort of undefeated tournament run, which is why I think that they're going to do okay, but not do exceptional, essentially. So B tier for Hand of the Archon for me. Next is Hearthkyn Salvagers. So this is a team that I've played against quite a few times now, and I have lost against Hearthkyn Salvagers. So you know, this isn't like a bitter team review. But the guy that I lost against, Bart, I think plays them exceptionally well, and it was still a very, very close game. And I just don't like, with their lack of movement. So they have essentially they have some like cool abilities, right? So they can catch a lot of people out if you play them properly, but to do so you need to have the various like stars align, right? So Ancestors are watching to be able to move up and do what they want to do. They need to use their comms effectively. Like they've become quite complicated because only having 5-inch move, you then need to be able to like do all of these various things and stack it properly. And a lot of people invest heavily into the Alpha Strike and lose models early on. I don't think that's the way to play the team at all. So I think they're a difficult team to play, and then they end up getting quite reliant on some key moves when they happen. So if the Ancestors of Watching doesn't work for them, if their Jump Pack Warrior going out and trying to pick up a double kill doesn't work for them, which, you know, can happen, then I think that's where they struggle. That being said, like, they're very, very good at stacking the odds against elites. So they will do really well into a lot of these elite teams. But I just think against the non-elite teams, that's where they start to hurt. Like, as soon as you don't have that momentum advantage, like as soon as their grudge tokens essentially don't work properly, I think that's where they hurt. So they have to like coordinate all of these things so effectively. The grudge tokens have to be in the right place. The CP has to be available to be able to do it. You have to have the APL and the right model at the right time to min-max this sort of mid-range team. All the while, you need to make sure you're scoring your TAC ops, which they do, by the way, have a fantastic TAC op selection. They are Recon and Security, which is the best two. So I think for me, they're sort of like towards the top of C tier. I think they're going to score well. I think in the hands of a good player, you'll do well with them. But equally, I think there are teams that are just going to be essentially natural predators to you, that you're going to really struggle to potentially kill. And that's essentially, I think, sadly, most of S tier is what's going to do that, and also most of A tier. So the highly popular teams at the moment are very, very good at killing you. And that is difficult, I think. So for me, their key deficiency is speed, and they're complicated to play, which is why I think that they're sort of top of C. That being said, if you play them well, you can absolutely beat people, and I did get beaten by them. So you know they are a legitimate sort of team, but I just think that they are just a bit too slow and a bit too difficult to play for most people. So top of C tier is where I think they sit. Okay, next up, the other type of dwarves, the Hernkyn Yaegirs. So these are like the Hearthkyn in the sense that they are slow, but they are, I think, in my opinion, less killy. They're less good into elites. They're less reliable. They have less tricks. They are more durable, which is slightly odd. But the main thing that this team dislikes is how unreliable their TAC op scoring is, right? So of all the abilities that this team has, is like scoring well is sadly not one of them. And so the way the primary op interacts with TAC ops in this edition, because 90% of the games you play, you want your primary op to be TAC op, because it's the thing that you have the most control over scoring. And this team, sadly, is like unlikely to get the 5 points or 6 points that they need on that to be able to get the 3 bonus points for the primary, which means that they just hurt on points quite often. So for me, they're a D tier team. I think they're probably towards the upper end of D tier. I think they still have some good abilities. They perform better into some of the meanies that are out there. So, for instance, Goremongers, with the damage reduction, find it a little bit harder to just yeet themselves in and kill them, and particularly when you can like shoot models that are coming into combat and all that sort of stuff. So they have some play in that regards, but they just, I think, struggle to score, and as a result, they sit in D tier for me. Bit too slow, bit too hard to score. That's where they sit. Okay, next. Hierotek Circle. At the other end of the spectrum is Hierotek Circle. Okay, so why do I think Hierotek Circle are S tier? Because I do think they're S tier. I think they're S tier because they can be really, really good at killing elites. So they are surprisingly fast, right? If you use a Chronomancer, you can move models around the board that people just are not expecting. And that is so, so useful. They can also exude a huge amount of control over your opponent. So again, using things like the nanomine to reduce the speed of teams, like that can help you against melee teams, but also it can help you against shooting teams. If you're a particularly slow team to start with, just saying, yeah, actually I'm going to slow you down even further is really useful. And the fact that they can then also use things like guard and open ball with death marks means that you can just lock down various angles. So the combination of essentially you can only move like 4 inches, and oh, by the way, there's a guy that's now on guard with a ignore obscurity sniper watching you, means that like often you're like, oh, do I actually move out and do this, or I'm just going to take a shot straight away, and you might not want to. Combine that with the fact that they have all these sort of magnifying angles and all that sort of stuff, so they can play quite well. They've got some very effective blast and potential for double blast. Most blast chips, a double blast usually kills, so horde teams have to be careful of that as well. So they have a whole bunch of like options with how to deal people. They can be, as I said, they can hit heavy into elites, they can slow down and control against melee teams, and they can, essentially like double kill, multi-kill quite easily against horde teams as well. So I like the way that they play, and they hit very, very hard. And the key part I think that like messes up a lot of other teams or makes it really hard to play them in a tournament is their ability to potentially deny the kill up. So if you start a trading game early with Hierotek, there's every chance that they're going to bring those models back. And if they bring them back towards the latter turning points and they reanimate them as they go, suddenly you're in a position where you're like, oh, I've now just lost like all of my kill up points and I didn't think I was going to. And by the way, like even killing them in the first place is hard, right? Like this team is like 10 wounds, 3 up saves, like they can be -1 attacks, they can be -1 damage if they take a Technomancer, they can be healing if you don't kill them in a single activation, etc, etc, right? They're a tough team to kill. Combine that with the fact that if you do get the kill, there's every chance that they just come back and they gain additional movement from their reanimates and all that sort of stuff. Wow, like it is a lot. So for me, I think they're an S tier team. I think they're really effective into elites. I think they have a lot of play into, as I said, like the horde teams, because they can catch people out with blast angles that no one even saw like coming from a mile off, and they have the potential for double blast as well. So for me, I think they're really good, and it can be really hard to play against them in that respect. So for me, they're an S tier team. I should have mentioned as well, their security and recon, 2 of the best archetypes. So they're really, really good at scoring tack up points as well. So just all in all, they're killing you effectively, so they're getting kill up points. They're denying you kill up points really effectively, so they're creating an asymmetric win advantage there. They're probably going to be collecting attack up points as they go, and therefore like they can play pretty well on crit up as well with their 3 APL models. So for me, I think they're an S tier team, and I don't really have too much more to say about Hierotek Circle. Okay, next up is Hunter Clade. So again, jumping from S tier all the way down to C tier for me is Hunter Clade. I think generally this team is probably looked down upon more than it should be. Like I don't think they're that bad. I think the Sicarians this edition look actually pretty interesting. I think the fact that they can have quite significant damage reduction is useful, and they can be killy where they need to be. I think the difficulty is that they have to sort of choose what they're doing and when to do it, and the depreciations can be really quite aggressive, I think, each time that they get used. So for me, I think you're almost locked into sort of a damage mitigation play style, and then hoping that you can sort of survive. That being said, like when you're out activated by horde teams, but you don't have enough killing potential for some elite teams, I think that's just where it kind of struggles. So for me, they're in the lower end of C tier. I think they'll do tack ops okay. Like I think they'll be fine in that regard, but yeah, I think they're just lacking something, and I think primarily that's the reliability of their doctrine imperatives, or countering the negatives of them. And again, they're not a particularly popular team, so maybe we just need to wait and see to have someone master them, and they'll show us how they're done. But for the moment, they're towards the bottom end of C tier for me. Imperial Navy breaches. So for me, this is a D tier team. I haven't seen anyone do particularly well with them. I haven't seen anyone manage to make it work, and I think I'm trying to think why it is that they don't. I think it's potentially just that they're not particularly good at killing elites. Like they have a few options to kill elites, but they're not that durable that you can like avoid an elite. Just if an elite wants to come and kill you, it will do so. You have to be careful where you place to make sure that you get your damage mitigation, all that sort of stuff, and you're running security. But once you've lost your melter gun and your sort of axe jack, I think you're running out of options to realistically kill elites. And that's the same as the last edition as this edition, and the popularity of elites that are out there just means it's even harder now. So yeah, I think they really struggle in that respect. I just don't think they've found their place yet in the meta. So for me, they're sort of in D tier, and I just haven't seen anyone have huge success into what I think are the main problem teams. And it should be worth noting that I think, as I said, I think Brew Brothers are pretty good at being able to kill them in ways that they can't get around. I think Chaos Cult can just eat them in melee. I think Goremongers, your key threats are going to move out and do some damage, and then after that you're done. And I think Pathfinders can pick them apart with shooting as well. So for me, like I look at the teams at the top of the meta and I think to myself, I don't want to be playing breaches against any of those teams, and as a result, like I think they have to be at in D tier. So yeah, sadly, breaches D tier for me. Next up is Inquisitorial Agents. I think this team's not getting played much at the moment. It's because it's essentially a very complicated team. I know they took some nerfs a while back, but they're broadly still pretty good. I don't think too much has changed on that. They have some. I said the bits that I like about them is they have the denounce ability to get around sort of that initiative reliability issues. They have somewhat reliable killing potential, particularly if they take Kasrkin, hitting on threes with like a ceaseless. So I think they're still a good team, right? I just think what the issue they struggle with is what most hordes are struggling with in this meta is just like the risk of double kill and how quickly you can lose models, and so therefore like unless you are effectively killing the enemy team really quickly, I think you struggle. But with all that being said, they're a team that can take any archetype. You can flex what you need to on the day. I think you're pretty much a jack of all trades when it comes to hordes. You can probably play pretty decently into Goremongers and that sort of stuff because you can have the melee options that are out there. So yeah, I still think they're an A tier team, but just probably at the bottom of A tier at the moment. But like I can totally see them going up and winning an event. Like it would not surprise me in the slightest. I just think that most of the players that were playing them have just jumped off them for a little bit. But I think you might see a resurgence of them sort of later on when other horde teams become less favourable. So tied to Inquisition, the next team actually in the list is Kasrkin. And I think for me, this is just like the opposite end of the spectrum. So Kasrkin, I think, might be the worst team in the game right now. And it's not, I don't think, entirely their fault, right? Like, which kind of sucks, but like hear me out. So Kasrkin like supposed to be the elite hunters, in my opinion, right? Like they have lots of very high damage weapons, all that sort of stuff, and they're really good at like, I'm going to go find that particular model and I'm going to kill that model really, really effectively. And that works great against, say, a like elf team or something which has 8 models that you can say yep, or 8 or 9 models, and you can go yep, cool, I have more models than you, so I can move up, I can kill you, and I can bully you because we're going to trade 1 for 1. And that works perfectly. The issue is that all the Elven teams are faster than Kasrkin. So the only way that you can do that is essentially by being 3 APL and doing a move, dash, and a shoot, and potentially even using the skill at arms to get the extra movement to be able to then match them on threat range. but like that is how you're going to do it, right? But you can only do that so many times a turning point, and as a result, like these guys will outrange all of your dudes and will just pick you apart. So like it is impossible basically for Kasrkin to get double kills, but it is very possible and very likely for people to double kill you. And as a team that I think its identity is based around essentially trading one model for one model, I don't know what they do in that instance. So I personally think like the fix that Kasrkin needs, and I guess actually I'll just quickly just touch on this as well. Like when you look at some of the other problem children in the meta, like you look at Goremongers, like I don't know what Kasrkin do in that matchup. Like that is a team that just cannot die to shooting, and Kasrkin's ability is I kill you in shooting, right? So like those two faction rules are like just a polar apart. You don't have the tools and the tricks to be able to get around it either. So they will come in with chainswords from a distance that you cannot reach them, and they will kill you, and you will not be able to kill them back. And they will do that potentially 8 times at a turning point, and the game will be over. Unless you hide, and then at which point you've just ceded board control to your opponent, and they're going to score their points, and you're going to do anything about it. So, in my opinion, I think what Kasrkin need to be successful, or is some key changes to, well, I think this is the simple solution is you give them a ploy similar to Pathfinders to be able to use their shooting weapons in melee. So you can't parry, devastating doesn't work, piercing goes away, all those sorts of things. But essentially 1 CP, you can use your shooting profile in melee, but you can't block, right? What that would do is it would give them the opportunity to get double kills, because they could then charge people. They could fight with a decent weapon that's not just their combat knives, and they could shoot someone else and potentially get double kills. But as it stands, like they're unlikely to kill a Marine, because all Marines are basically 14 wounds now. So you're looking at getting like 2 crits, but against like the decent Marine teams that are out there, like Warp Coven, that's never going to happen. And then essentially you're relying on them either failing a save or you getting all your hits. So more often than not, you just don't have the kills, and then you're losing models at a rate in which you cannot sustain. So yeah, for me, like I don't know, I think they need that double kill potential. I think it would help them against hordes. It would make Eldari players question like, oh, can I actually just take a charge and a shoot? And it would make elite players a little more cautious as well. And things like Goremongers wouldn't just be able to just literally bully you with melee alone. So I think Kasrkin might be the worst team in the game at the moment. Might be harsh. Someone might disagree with that, but I can't think of a team that's struggling more into this meta based on everything else that I see that's going on. And I just think that most of the other teams that are out there can just outperform them. And being security and seek and destroy, like they don't have enough activations to out-activate people to get the security tac ops. They don't have enough like 3 APL like sustaining to be able to then get kills like and be alive to score overrun or anything like that. They can't get champion because they're never going to get a double kill. Like I don't know, like what do they do? Like what tackle up do they take where they can then realistically score it, or realistically max it, unless they happen to be playing against a team which they outnumber or out-activate and can secure security against without just being killed too effectively. Like I don't see the team personally. Maybe scouts. Like that could be the one. All right, so that's Kasrkin. Sadly, I fucking love Kasrkin, so I want them to be better. I'm really like annoyed they're not. They look cool. They are definitely a kill team. Let's make them great. Give them some buffs. Just my opinion. Okay, next up is Kommandos. So again, this team used to be really dominant. I think they probably still are pretty decent. Like I think they have, in my opinion, a decent place in the meta. I think what lets them down realistically is just tac ops. So they're infiltration and seek and destroy. They're a 10 wound, 10 model team, or 11 model team, sorry, because they can take both the grot and the bomb squig. So that like they basically have to play infiltration and surveillance with the grot. They're going to try to score that every single turn. if they lose initiative or someone kills their grot before they can do that, then they just end up being in a horrible place where they now have to use their boys to be scoring that attack op, and that kind of hurts them a lot. So yeah, so they are like they're fine. I just think they're just struggling a little bit into the meta. They don't like the fact there's loads of elites. The fact there's loads of teams that can just chunk through 10 wounds quite happily, they don't enjoy. So I think they're sort of locked into somewhat poor attack op choices, whilst like coincidentally being in a meta of teams that kill them really easily and effectively, and therefore they don't really know what to do. So yeah, so for me, they're sort of like middle of C tier. I think they're not bad, but they're not doing anything crazy either. And from the stats, no one seems to be winning particularly high with them or doing anything particularly crazy with them. But maybe people are just bored of them. I can't really say. But yeah, so for me, sort of lower C tier is how I think they fare. Okay, next up is Legionary. This is a bit of a controversial one. So I had my worst tournament performance Legionary. So it's probably weird that I'm going to rate them as an A tier team, because that's just me basically saying that I'm bad. But there you go. That's the inside scoop. You're welcome. Yeah. So I think Legionary are good still. I think I played them poorly, and I think there's a whole bunch of reasons why I didn't do well with them. But you can watch a different video to see all that. But I think what they do well is compete quite well into the meta of teams that are out there, and they can give them a good opportunity. So things like Goremongers, I don't think enjoy fighting Legionary, particularly like Khorne Legionary with Strike on Death and that sort of stuff, because they just cannot trade effectively into them. And the fact that essentially the Khorne guys are just going in and always doing damage. And if you try and fight them, they're going to do just as much damage back to you. Or they can go a different direction. They can go Tzeentch and just shoot you twice and double tap people, and again just as effectively kill them. Things like Sanctifiers, they like the fact that you can have the sort of the raw damage just to get through the damage mitigation that they have. So that's good. Same for Chaos Cult. Like Legionary can double kill Chaos Cult like no one else. Like I think for them it's a really bad matchup to be able to have that potential. But that being said, you know, there is still the natural predators out there that exist. Teams like Warp Coven, teams like Hierotek Circle, teams like Pathfinders, I think are really tough for Legionary. But yeah, and it's worth mentioning this as well. I also think they're really map dependent. Like I think if you're on Beta Decima with Legionary, I think you're gonna struggle. Like quite simply, you're not a shooting team. Like you're a close range team, which might have shooting within it. So like the Tzeentch guys with the bolt pistols and that sort of stuff, you're like, oh yeah, I'm a shooting team, but you are within 8 inches, or 6 inches if you're trying to do undivided. But you're a close range team, right? It's like you're using a melter gun, you're using your bolt pistols, you're using crack grenades, whatever you want to be. It's not long range shooting. If you take out a heavy bolter, you only need to shoot it once. Like if you shoot a missile launcher, you only shoot like you're not getting that sort of that weight of damage out that you need with those weapons. So you're a close range team is what I'm getting at. Which means on things like Into the Dark, on certain maps, like depending upon how they're laid out, you can be really like in a really strong place. Like you can stage really well, you can be on all the doors, you can force people to just not engage with you in a way in which they want to at all, and that's awesome. Also on some of the maps, like Into the Dark, is an absolute shooting gallery, and you end up being stuck in the open, needing to use your shooting to hopefully hold people back. But like 8 inches can just about sometimes do it, but also in some of those maps can't, which can kind of suck. So yeah, that's where I think they sit. And because Volcus is so heavy, they do really well in Volcus, in my opinion. So Legionary, I think they're an A tier. I think they're towards the lower end of A tier. I think they're a good elite team. I don't think they like going into, you know, some of the real hunters that are out there, but they have some real raw damage potential. So if you're not careful, they will just table you so quickly. Like it is not it is not difficult for a Siege Marine to kill 3 guys in a turning point, or a champion to do the same. So like you have to be careful because these guys will come for you, and particularly with like the strike on death or the counteract fights and all that sort of stuff, they can do a lot of damage. So for me, A tier still. I think they're still really good, but they are not quite. Well, they just have some natural predators that are worth being aware of. Next up is Mandrakes. So for me, I think they're just a like worse elven team. I don't like the design mechanics personally, just because I don't think they're interactive, but that's a separate conversation. So they play infiltration, they play recon, right? They're really good at doing surveillance because they can teleport up to places and get their surveillance points and that sort of thing. But they aren't particularly killy, they aren't particularly durable, and you're hoping, I think, that you're going to get those points and that people aren't going to kill you fast enough. Combine that with the fact that, as I said, if you're doing that, you're probably not on the objectives for crit op and that sort of thing. I think they're just a bit too matchup dependent. I think most of the time I prefer one of the other elven teams, because I just think they sort of struggle. 4 attacks, they're a bit whiffy. I don't know. I'm not quite sure what it is about them, but just most of the time I think that they just aren't doing the damage they need to get the kills. It might be partly as well because a lot of them are sort of 4-5 damage, that they get like a crit and 2 hits, but that's not enough to do the 14 they need to kill elites and that sort of thing. So it might be stuff like that as well, but I just think that they're not doing it for me in comparison to a lot of what the other elven teams are doing. So for me, I think they're at the bottom of C tier. I think most of the teams that I see above them have a somewhat favourable matchup into that. So yeah, for me, bottom of C tier for Mandrakes. Next up is Nemesis Claw. So this is a bit controversial because I put them below Legionary, when they will probably in a 1v1 beat Legionary, because they have Vox Scream and their ability to do chip damage on the charge and then fight people that they can do the break points that they need to do, right? But I just think that they have a worse time into some of the other matchups that Legionary can potentially do better than. Maybe that's unfair. Like it's a 50-50 between the two, because I think Legionary are better into your Sanctifiers, your Chaos Cults. I think Nemesis Claw are better into probably your sort of Warp Coven and your Hierotek and that sort of thing. I think they both get spanked by Pathfinders. But I think they're still good. Like I think they're still a good team. I think they're still able to do the damage. I guess the other point that's worth noting for them is they really hate getting injured. So their reliability and their ability to do stuff drops off quite significantly as the game progresses. Whereas Legionary can get around that. In fact, most of the elite teams can get around that. So yeah, for them, I think they just they need it to go well early, and if they don't, then they begin to struggle. The other bit for them, which why I think probably more impactful, and why they sit below Legionary, is their tac op choices. So they are Seek and Destroy and Infiltrate, which most of the time means that they're taking Seek and Destroy on something like Overrun. But if you're against like a team which you struggle to interact with, like they can hold back and play a slow game against you, there's a chance that you're just not going to score any tac ops in turning point 2. At which point, it's like, well, what happens now? And if you then end up being like in a game where, say, you're running, your elite mirror match and you're trying to do champion, well, now you're really reliant on your champion getting the kills. It becomes really swingy, and if you don't, then you can lose a game on a dice roll or initiative roll, right? So, like for me, I think the tac ops is probably what lets them down. Even though they are similar to Legionary, I think it's just not being able to have that flex into security if you wanted it, based on the map and the mission, is what holds Nemesis Claw back probably. That and the injury issue. So for me, A tier, just slightly below Legionary, but it's a 50-50. It's a coin flip, right? Like they're better into some matchups, they're worse into others. It varies. But yeah. Okay, next, looking at the other end of the table, it's Novitiates. And for me, I haven't seen anyone have success with the Novitiates since the nerfs. I don't know if that's because people don't enjoy their playstyle at the moment. That's probably what it is, I think. Or that they are now just, because they don't have the ability to stack the damage reduction they had previously, they're just too easily killed, and therefore they don't do enough with their 10 bodies reliably enough. So that could also potentially be it. But for me, I just think they're kind of struggling a little bit in the meta. By teams that are activated by, they can take quite a lot of damage. They can get some sneaky double kills off, but I don't know. I just think that they're kind of. I'm not seeing the success with them that you would expect. And again, maybe I'm being harsh. Maybe just because all the sort of the players that play them religiously, pun intended, have moved off, or maybe not. We'll see. But for me, right now, I haven't seen anything that makes me think that they should be above a D tier. Okay, next we're talking Pathfinders. So Pathfinders for me, they've had a bit of a glow up, and I think they can be really, really good. I just want to explain why, I guess. So with so many elites in the meta, like Pathfinders just have the tools to take down elites really, really effectively. Being able to essentially stack mark lights on people to get saturated, plus on ballistic skill, balanced. They can make it really punishing if you move up against them, and they can hit you from surprisingly far away, right? So their ability to move up the board rapidly based on an initiative win is phenomenal, right? So like they have an APL buff Grenadier who can suddenly recon sweep, get +1 inch to their move, and be all of a sudden they're 13 inches forwards and throwing a fusion grenade at you. With potentially rerolls, whatever. So like wild, like the potential for movement there. And they have access to recon, which is again is fantastic for scoring the points that they need to score, right? So and before in the past they reached out with APL efficiency, but they can essentially trade CP for APL now. I think they are a bit reliant on like having models ready to shoot people that are charging into them against melee teams. But it's nice that they have that option now. So particularly on like Into the Dark, you can be running guys on guard to stop someone charging you during a turning point. And then if they win initiative, well, if they charge you, you can then at least be shooting first with your pulse weapon, which is really nice. The drone control abilities are really cool, so they can actually rapidly push out and do stuff. If they are playing like loot or something like that, they can have a model that's just sat on the objective that before the game even begins, just takes that. And because they have initiative advantage, like they can probably set it up where they have someone that's there, that if you put someone there, they will nuke off the board turning point 1. So then when you're playing loot, they're just going to go, yeah, I'm going to get that, and I'm going to force you into a points deficit straight away. And the best thing you can do is potentially kill this guy. But if I win initiative, I can potentially take 2 of these, whatever. So some really cool, strong abilities for Pathfinders. And now that they can get that sort of that killing reliability in there as well, I think they're in a strong place against a lot of these elite teams. So yeah, I think they're in a good position. That being said, with all these things, I do think there are some good counters out there. I think they don't like Goremongers. They move so quickly. They can hide out of visibility, not take any tokens, potentially turn 1, and then suddenly rapidly move up and start striking people. I think Chaos Cult's a similar thing, where they can essentially start hugging them and then mutating, and then suddenly you've got too much that you can't deal with by shooting into combat, and that kind of thing. So I think they're a really strong team. I think they're a good place. I think they're an S tier. I think they'll do well, and I will not be surprised to see them going undefeated and winning tournaments at any point. And they are surprisingly fast, surprisingly killy. And they love the activation advantage. So useful for them. Okay, next up, Phobos, a team that I've been playing quite a bit recently and having loads of fun with. So I think they're a really good elite team. One of the best elite teams, but I don't think they are the best elite team. because they don't have the flexibility that some of the other elite teams have. But I'm playing them for a slightly different reason, but that's kind of like by the by. But for me, they work really well for my play style, and I'm enjoying them at the moment, which is why maybe I'm overrating them, or maybe I'm rating them exactly correctly, or maybe I'm underrating them. I couldn't tell you, but I'm just going to explain what I think Phobos are at. So being an elite team that has access to recon, there are 2 elite teams that have access to recon, and you'll notice that those 2 elite teams, in my opinion, are at the top of the meta, because they can guarantee score points. They have a method of free mission actions, so APL efficiency to do it. You're probably getting counteracts to be able to do the same thing. So they're just really effective and efficient at doing so. They have the ability to skip activations, which is really useful against other elite teams, to be able to keep yourself on meta. And they have a really good control of the board with the marksman and the omni scramble ability. So for me, I think they're a really strong team. I think the fact that they have recon and that sort of stuff is really good. The issues I have with them is I think that they're really fragile. I think a few key dice rolls here and there, and they can suddenly come apart. And I think you have to play them in a very different way than how most elites play, which doesn't necessarily lend itself to all scenarios, and that's that sort of thing. I've had a lot of very close games with them, so they don't necessarily feel comfortable when you're playing them, because you're always one thing away. And they're a very precise team. Like, you have to make sure that you're using your Omni Scramble ability correctly. Like if you don't have visibility to the right model at the right time, or someone's got the ability to move that model out of the way, suddenly you're in a sort of hurting place. But that being said, like they're very killy, they're very fast, they score well. So for me, they're towards the top of A tier. You know, like I think they've got some difficult matchups. I think Chaos Cults is a hard matchup for them. Just the fact that you can have Torments that I just don't necessarily have enough damage output. Like, you can do a surprising amount of damage with bolters, but just not like reliably enough to double kill. You're probably killing one Torment, and then the other Torment is killing a Marine. That kind of trading. And if they get a melee with you, like, it hurts for the Sickening Aura. Hierotek, I think, is a horrible matchup as well, because of the just raw damage Hierotek can do, and the fact that you are struggling on activations, right? So they're going to move out, they're going to be scoring, you're going to be scoring, and if you're not careful, they will just kill you so fast, and each time you have to invest so much to kill them, they can just bring that model back. Yeah, and then I've sort of talked about the rest of those. Warp Coven's another one, which they just have the ability to just skew how results go in a way which can be really important, and have enough Zangors to do mission actions and that sort of stuff, and just wait you out if they want to. But I think they're in a good place. Like I like their play style personally. I think they'll score well. I think they can win somewhat consistently, but they're also difficult to play, and they're fragile. So like you die quicker than you expect. So you have to use all their tricks, to get around what a lot of enemy teams can do against you. Okay, next up is Plague Marines. So this is kind of like, for me, the opposite side of elites. So Phobos, like, they sit out of the threat range and then they move in when they want to, right? Plague Marines literally don't have that option, right? So Plague Marines are too slow to do that. So therefore they have to sit in the threat range, which means they can be quite susceptible to dice rolls, in my opinion. And they have some things to skew that in their advantage. So they have Contagion to make it harder for them to be hit and take damage. But I guess the point that I'll make on this is, like, they're a team that is going to move up. They have to be quite far forwards. They have to be in the threat range for them to be able to do anything impactful in the following turn, right? Because if you're being out activated as Plague Marines and you're running, say, like security, well, your opponent's just going to deny you tac ops all day. So like, you have to be able to then like kill them and interact with them, or you're going to run like Seek and Destroy. But again, you're a slow team, so you're far back, so you have to be able to move up and take those shots. So you have to step in. Now, the bit which helps them is they are insanely durable. The disgustingly resilient rolls that just basically just stacks like wounds is crazy. The ability for the heals that the team can have is crazy. Like if you're not careful, you think you've done a lot of damage to a model. Suddenly the Psycho activates, that model's regained, like 6 or 7 wounds, and then they're off moving, doing other things, and they're doing stuff, and you're like, I actually did nothing to this person, even though I thought I was going to kill them a second ago. And they're just very, very good at sort of, I said, like doing that durability of elites. But I think it's probably a play style thing. Like I think probably you can see that almost the two different options there. Like Phobos are very fast, like, and they're very like easy to kill. Plague Marines are very slow, very hard to kill. So it kind of depends how you want to play it. And I think your Legionary are sort of like slap bang in the middle. The issue I have is like, I think you have to be one of the two. Like I think that's where Legionary and Nemesis Claw can struggle sometimes. Is like if you're not durable enough, like then like and you're not fast, like you're just dying, but you're not like out of the threat range. Whereas Phobos can exist out of the threat range and then still get the kill. So for me, Plague Marines, they're just like the most durable team that there is. And they're a whole damage, or they're a whole stat check that a lot of people just can't answer. But they're not particularly killy. Like they kill okay, but they're just a stat check that a lot of people just, I think, really struggle to find a response to, particularly if you're a melee team. So like Goremongers and that sort of stuff, I think hate playing them. -1 to hit. Fellgor hate playing them. Like that, making people hit on 5s at points, it's just disgusting. So you combine that with the amount of damage that they can just stack, and the fact that they're going to poison you and you're going to take damage out of activation, all that sort of stuff can just add up really, really effectively. So I think they are sort of towards the top end of A tier, in a slightly different reasons for me as to why they exist below Phobos. But I might have some bias because I personally prefer Phobos. But I can see people wanting to say that Plague Marines are better. Okay, next up is Ratlings. This is a team that's like turned out to be a bit of my nemesis, but I still think that they struggle to do everything they need to do all the time, and I think it might just be because they're too complicated. It might be it, but they're an 11 operative team. The security in their infiltrate, so. On some maps, security is amazing, and they can essentially create like a wall of obstacles that people can't really get around, and they can use Seek Light to mean that you can't hide on vantage very well. So they can essentially use that to their advantage to make sure that you can't jump over it and do those sorts of things. But on some maps you can't. The obstacle course doesn't necessarily work, so you can't force people back in the way you would like to. So then you're locked into like infiltration, that sort of thing, and they do have the slingshot guy that can go collect surveillance points, but it's a bit of a tough one. I think the bit that potentially that they struggle with is again, I guess it's like a movement potential like problem. Scarp is really effective. Like Scarp is such a cool rule to be able to move around and do sort of stuff, but you have to be like constantly holding it back to be able to use it for a threatening move that you need, because otherwise you're not fast enough to do the damage. So you need to be able to say, I can't shoot you right now, but if you move there and do this, then between activations I'm going to do a dash, and then I can suddenly be stationary to shoot you that you weren't necessarily expecting, or I can move a grenadier up, etc., etc. So there's a lot to think about there, and they're therefore quite complicated. And I think also the fact that you have this weird complication of how many Ogryns do I take? Like is it the right option here? Do I use deploy here? All that sort of stuff. There's so many equipment choices and operative choices. They're a real like team that you can deep dive build into. But I just haven't seen them yet really popping off very reliably. So I don't know. Like I want them to be good, but I just got this feeling that they're just kind of like that they're okay, and they can do well into a lot of things, but I think against some teams they just kind of struggle. I said they kind of have a tool against most problem sets, but like the dog can make people run away from melee teams and that kind of thing. But I just also think I don't know what it is about them. but they're just kind of, they do decent, but they don't win that much. So for me, top of C tier, you know, I think that's a fair place for them to go. They'll routinely do okay, but I haven't seen anyone taking them particularly far. Well, not yet anyway. Okay, next we are into Sanctifiers. Are they the best team in the game? This is gonna be a weird one, right? So I think they are, but I think they have like the what's the best way of describing it? Like suffering with success. Like at the moment, every single player that's out there has read Sanctifiers rules, like the competitive tables. Like they know what your team does. They are planning to play against you. They're expecting to run against Sanctifiers. They've probably taken a team that they think is going to do well against Sanctifiers. And so you're basically reliant on the raw strength of the team to get you through, because everyone is like gunning to beat you. And therefore, like, I don't really know how to describe it, but I think they're like the best team, but because they're up there, like they don't get the results that they want, if that makes sense. So they're going to win, like have a really high win percentage, I think, but I think they're going to struggle to win events because I think I think most of the high end players are just going to be gunning to beat you and preparing for it the whole time. So I think you're going to struggle to catch them out with stuff, but they're still really good. So it's like I don't know, like catch-22. You're going to do well, but you're going into a field of people that are ready for that and are expecting to play against you and have prepared to play against you. So make of that what you will. S tier is my take. I don't know what they need to do to dial them down. I'll have a think about that. But they probably do need dialing down a little bit. They just have a little bit too much going on. A bit too fast, a bit too durable, a bit too much like defensive stacks that they can do on individual models, that kind of thing. Cool. So that's Sanctifiers, S tier, obviously. Scout Squad. So again, my poor Scout Squad. Like, I thematically like the team. I think their sort of scouting options stuff is really cool. I just think that they struggle with being essentially a 9 model team that is 2 APL, and they don't get around that. Now, hypothetically, in a world in which they could use their strategic gambit to add an APL and use it at every turning point, I think they could be really good. Like they could suddenly become like quite threatening for double kills, which makes them better against hordes. The fact that they can have, you know, like double shoots to attack on Goremongers and that sort of stuff. But as they stand at the moment, they're not particularly fast. Like they're 10 wounds, so they're okay. But there's a lot of things out there right now that are getting quite good at doing 10 wounds of damage. I just think they just don't necessarily have the tools and the APL efficiency to do everything they need to do. So normally I'd say, you know, the fact you're playing Recon is really good. But they don't have the APL to be just applying beacons twice a turn, every turn, because if they do, then they're not doing much else. All their big heavy weapons, like all their heavy damage hitters, are heavy or stationary, and you don't have a way to move them necessarily very easy, like say Ratlings do. So you can't move the sniper out and shoot someone. You have to have had them set up and be in the right position, but then they're probably in a vulnerable position or they're in the wrong position, so you can't use them effectively. So yeah, I just think they need that. I think they need their weapons. I think the heavy bolts from the missile launcher should probably become heavy reposition. The sniper's silent profile should become heavy dash. I think that's fair. And I would like to see them have like that APL buff, be able to do that every turn. I think would be really useful. Then suddenly they could play palm beacons. They'd be fine with it, and their leader can handle AP as well. I think that'd be good. But I just think right now, I think they're okay, like in comparison to the rest of D tier. But when I look at against the teams that they're going to be playing against, I think to myself, there is no way a team like Nemesis Claw doesn't just eat you alive. I think like Pathfinders are just going to reliably do enough damage to kill you, and yeah, I just think it's just gonna suck having those 9 activations and not being able to do enough with it. In my opinion, might be wrong, but yeah. So for me, Scout Squad D tier, sadly. Next, we're into Tempestus Aquilons, and they've had a bit of a glow up, right? Because they were really struggling before. I think they would have been in D tier, down with Kasrkin, that sort of stuff previously. But I bumped them all up to B tier, but I think they're like the lowest of Bs. I think you could probably say the top of C. And again, this is because I think they've got some natural predators, and those natural predators are very popular at the moment. So 11 operatives is a huge buff, in my opinion. It's a really significant buff. And I think that they are way better than they are before. But they just have a few bits that they're going to struggle with. So like they are recon, but because you can't plant as you drop, if that makes sense, on the same turn, planting beacons is actually pretty difficult for them. You have to have like just warriors that are out doing stuff, which then you end up sacrificing quite a lot of your APL. And the fact that their comms is tied to their leader just means that, again, for APL efficiency to do that sort of thing becomes really difficult. They also have this like weird problem set where like all of their ploys are very much geared towards being like aggressively jump in, do stuff. But because you're a horde team, the general mechanic is that you don't play that way, right? Like horde teams want to hold off and not do anything, and then push forwards like at the end of a turning point, do damage and then carry it over. And Aquilons can't do that. So because they have to drop everyone in on turning point 2, like they're then exposed. So like they have to sort of start to be reliable. So to do it at the end, then turning point 3, it just doesn't quite work. Like I think they need to like either be able to drop onto turning point 3 or yeah, like I don't know. Like that's, you tell me. Like they're decent, they're okay. I just think they're a worse shooting team than Pathfinders or Vetguard, and they play recon worse than Kinband. So yeah, like they're okay. They're quite killy. They're okay against elites, but I think they struggle against melee teams that can just come and chew them up. And I think they get out activated by some of the teams as well. They're just better at killing them than they are killing them. So yeah, that's kind of my take on Aquilons. But what's your guys' thoughts, apart from them being not APL efficient and that sort of stuff? Low B, they're fine. They'll do well. They'll place okay at tournaments. You'll probably see them in the top 10 quite regularly, I think. Next up, Vespid Stingwings. So I can't work out. Like I think maybe these guys could be good. Like if you play very aggressive and win your initiatives. So like, and you can't be activated. Like lots of caveats. So essentially they're not good. But like, okay, hypothetically, in a world in which you can get the last activation against a sort of team where you can then move dash your flamer and have it in a position where it can then torch a whole bunch of people, and have a grenadier somewhere else and then the grenade launcher somewhere else, and you have all these threats that are sort of simultaneous, like you can, I think, threat saturate people and they can do a surprising amount of damage really quickly. The issue is that like outside of those big threats, those sort of like big multi-kill threats, everything else is just like hitting on 4s. With some rerolls, you need the lethal 5 up to make the usual guns decent, and then yeah, you're just kind of like reliant on them going well with those rolls. Again, with the recon thing, you can't fly; you have to walk to plant your beacons. So the best recon tackle you're probably not using. If you're like against like elite teams, you can go for confirmed kill, I guess, but it just kind of hurts. So I don't know. Like for me, I think it's probably the lack of APL efficiency. I think if this team had a comms, they'd probably be A tier. And without a comms, they're probably C tier. So like I think that bottom is C, and I think it's like that's the weird level of how much difference a comms would make, I think, to this team. or some method of just being able to just punch further forward and just do a bit more with them, because Seek and Destroy doesn't work for a 2 APL team like that. I don't think they don't have the survivability presence to be able to move on to a storm hostile objective and clear it. They don't really have much double kill outside the flamer and the blast and that sort of stuff. But yeah, I think for the moment, I've said that they're sort of bottom of C. I think that's reasonable. I think, as I said, if you gave them a comms, they'd shoot right up, because then they could probably play plant beacons. They could probably do other things, and they'd catch people out, I think, and they'd be way more impactful. But for now, I think they're down at the sort of the bottom of C for Vespid. Next up is Void Dancer Troop. For me, I think these guys are top of A tier. Like, they're not the sort of, like, bust is the wrong word. They're not the strongest of teams out there. Like, they're not the, meta-defining team. But I still think they're really good. I think they can play the sort of fast, hard-hitting beacon, like, recon gameplay just so effectively. Being so much APL, like, on the board, they can just move so quickly. They're really, really good at that. And again, most of the elite teams that are out there, you're waiting out their activations, and then when you are hitting them, it's with something that's really reliable, does a lot of damage, probably kills the model. And if you win initiative, you can probably kill a second one because you have so much movement to get to them and do what you need to do, right? So I think they're really strong. I think they're top of A tier. I think they do what the elves want to do the best, in my opinion. I think there's potentially some matchups that are difficult, but they do have ways to get around them. So for instance, Goremongers, you have to use all of your abilities sort of perfectly sequenced to kill them, because you're unlikely to yeet yourself into combat and kill a Goremonger in melee unless they whiff. So you're kind of like, you're charging in, seeing if they whiff, and if they don't, you can then fall back after striking them, shoot them on the way out and kill them that way. But then, like, you're always sort of on this edge of, like, but if I roll, like, if they roll well and I roll poorly or whatever, like, I end up getting stuck, then it's horrible. But I think they just score so effectively. Like, and I think what they'll do is they'll end up just shooting Goremongers most of the time whilst planting beacons. And as soon as you're chipped as slightly as a Goremongers, like as soon as they crack in your armor, then they're in, and they're going to kill you. So yeah, it's just something to be aware of with that. But yeah, so I think they're really good. I think they score really effectively. I think that, as I said, the APL efficiency of the team and this move potential of the team is really good. So for me, top of A tier for Void Dancers. We're nearing the end now, so last 3 to go. So we have Warp Coven. Warp Coven for me is still S tier. Like, I think people, when they saw the nerfs, I think a lot of the people that played them a lot just sort of went away, because they're like, I've played them now, I've done it, I've completed it in a sense, and I want to try something new. But I still think when you look at what this team can do, they're exceptionally good. Like, their gunners are so strong. They are, really durable. They're very killy. Their sorcerers have a fantastic array of abilities. They have so much flexibility in their team to be able to mix up what they want to do. If they get put into a matchup where being an elite team hurts them, then they can just suddenly become a Zangor heavy team and just go that way. And they can just flex like that, like however they need, and they can have the right amount of activations based on the opponent whenever they need to have it. So for me, I think that flexibility and the sort of the option of those operatives is just so strong. Yeah, so for me, they're S tier. Again, they have access to recon, which I think is a really strong mission archetype for an elite team to be able to have, because they can be stalling activations, scoring points as they do, and then suddenly the last activation can be the sorcerer going forwards and doing a whole lot of damage. Very confident in the fact that you're not going to be able to kill them in a single activation. Plant a beacon on a counteract, or move, dash, plant beacon, whip back with the temporal flux, so that they aren't even exposed anymore. that kind of like those levels of abilities is just phenomenal, right? So they have this amazing array of tools that just made them so strong. So for me, I think they're definitely S tier, and they belong up there still as one of the best elite teams, in my opinion, still. Okay, next up we have Wrecka Krew. Now this is a team that, again, like I think I put them towards the bottom of C tier, and that's just kind of based on I've not seen anyone like go super well with them right like now. I think they can do really good into elites. Like, they have so much damage potential. It's crazy. Like they can just like slap people around, like it's no business. But it all just seems to feel so dependent on like rolling sixes. So like I think that they are a roller coaster of a team, and I just think that your luck's going to run out during a tournament. Combine that with the fact that their security and seek and destroy, and the way that their sort of APL buff mechanic works. If you can wait them out, and they don't get those points and that sort of stuff, like if you out activate them, which a lot of teams do, you can do so and then really punish them, and they won't be scoring attack ops on turning point 2. So if you deny them points on turning point 2, or you force them in security and then you can deny on turning point 3 and 4, that's really useful. If you're playing like ITD, the doorways can be really problematic for them to be able to get across and deal with. So then they're forced into a guard game plan, and that doesn't necessarily work particularly well if you can get shot back and that sort of thing. So I don't know. I just think they're a bit too terrain dependent. The attack ops don't help them out too much, and when they are doing what they want to do, it can become quite swingy with the requirement to be rolling sixes. But if it does work, like the damage potential is just through the roof, right? So like you can have a Marine that's just like thinks that they're going to be the damage is just too much. It can kill pretty much anything. So a fun team, but I think for like longevity in a tournament, like your likelihood of that working out each time and having the right mission and that kind of thing is, I think the bit that they're going to struggle with. So for my opinion, I think they're actually probably worse than Kommandos, just because of their reliability of attack ops and their reliability of scoring. I just feel like they're going to get out activated and then outscored in most of their games, is my opinion. Okie dokie. So the final one to talk about is Wyrmblade. This is a team that, again, I haven't seen much success with. And I think that for me is probably down to the fact that they're infiltration and seek and destroy. They're sort of a horde team that I think just, it feels like they're struggling to do what they want to do as a horde. But they still have some really cool abilities. So like the cult agents and all that sort of stuff can do work. They have access to those 3 APL models. But I just don't think it's enough to be able to get the attack ops reliably that they want. And therefore they're having to play like I guess an infiltration game, which then they score their points, but they probably lose on kill op, and that kind of thing. So for me, like I think they're an okay horde. I put them sort of mid of C tier, but maybe I'm being generous, maybe being harsh. Again, I just haven't seen them be used to the potential to say, actually, yeah, you know what, they should be higher than that. So yeah, for me, Wyrmblade are middle of C. Okay, that is all of the teams, which is a humongous amount of teams. I'm just going to quickly then, I guess, talk about the general sort of summary. So I broadly agree. I think, having talked through it, where all of these teams sit, there's a few ones that that I think could slide around a little bit. I think B tier's probably the most likely or most susceptible to change. As I said, I think Fellgor in certain circumstances could go up, but I think there's just too many predators for them right now. It's just sort of pinning them down a little bit. But I guess my point is it's very meta dependent. So if you're a Fellgor player and your meta is like loving elves and hates elites, then you're probably living the time of your life right now. But like if you're a Fellgor player and all you see is a wall of Plague Marines against you, you're probably like, well, this just sucks. And you probably feel like you're worse than B tier potentially. So my point being is very meta dependent. It's what's local to you, and that comes to my point about that I think it's a very like counter meta at the moment, right? So you might be running a team that is really, really effective in your meta. Like Hierotek's super effective into elite. So if you're in an elite dense meta, I think Hierotek are thoroughly enjoying it right now. But you could then coincidentally go to a different meta where they're running entirely hordes or whatever and have a completely different sort of play experience to that. So I guess my point is that it's like it is that back to rock paper scissors mentality of it's hard to have a team right now that is going to be like, yeah, I can beat all of these and have a good time against all of them. But what I will say is that, like, even with that being said, because that is, I guess, it is quite critical, but there was at the tournaments I've been to, there has been a good selection of teams in the top 10 every time. So I think for Warhammer, where I just finished it last weekend, there was only one duplication in the top 12, or was it top 10? One duplication in the top 10, and I think there was 2 duplications in the top 12, which was like, I think, Sanctifiers and Plague Marines. Everything else was like one of each different faction, which is really cool to see. Like it's nice to see that there is so much variety between teams, and as much as I personally prefer a more I prefer a more balanced meta where possible. I don't think the meta is in a bad place. Sorry, balanced meta sounds wrong. It may sound like there's a massive skew. I prefer it where there isn't a matchup dependent meta where if you've brought the wrong team and you see the team that's against you, that's your nemesis team, you suddenly lose because of the matchup, if that makes sense. So I would like to see them work more on that part of the balance, and this is like getting really surgical now, because as I said, there's a really good split, but and I'm almost certain they will do this, is they'll continue to like surgically change teams the way they need to make it so that if you're playing a shooting horde and you're playing against Goremongers, you've got a good chance now, right? So like it becomes more of a game for both players, and I think that's what I assume will be the next bit that they start doing, is that surgical changing of teams that they need to mix it up. Obviously, this is all pre the release of the new teams, which could completely change the meta, and we might find out that the new teams are like insanely good, or maybe they're insanely bad. Like, we don't really know right now, right? So it's going to change up how those teams perform and play and what they do to the meta. So when they get released, we'll find that out, and that's pretty exciting for us. But that is my opinion, my subjective opinion, based on, as I said, some objective stats as to where I think the meta lies. But potentially you guys can, I said, put your comments below. What's your favourite team? Where are they placed? And is that true? Is your anecdotal experience of running your team true to what I've said in that meta in this tier list, or am I completely off? And when you do your answer, if you can quantify a little bit about like your local meta, do you only play like Beta Decima? Do you only play ITD, or do you only play Volcus, or do you play a mix of all of them, or is there certain map packs that you don't play at all? Whatever it is, right? Like, give us some context so I can understand why your opinion is the way it is, and potentially we can get some good dialogue, and that'd be awesome to be able to see. So hopefully that's been useful. I think it's good to give that context of why I placed a team where I've placed it, and I want to just go through all of them to make sure I didn't miss your team if you're a particular player of that, however it might well be. That'll be the end of this episode. So hopefully it was useful, and I'll look forward to seeing you all next time. Take it easy. That brings us to the end of the episode. Hopefully you found something new or useful while listening, and if you did, throwing us a like would be greatly appreciated. If you want to make sure you don't miss any episodes, make sure you hit that subscribe button and click on the bell so you get notifications as soon as the next one drops. It really is the best way to help a small channel like ours. And if you can't wait and you do want early access, we have a Patreon where you can get exclusive access to all our content ahead of time. As always, we'd love to hear your thoughts and feedback. Just drop a comment below and we'll get right to you. Thank you so much for listening. I'm your host Ryan, this has been Turning Point Tactics, and we'll see you next week.